Hello and welcome, I'm Tebabu Assefa. My guest today, Tebabu Assefa, is one of the prime movers of an initiative to promote commerce and trade in both Africa and the United States. And last week, the initiative Business Cooperation for Africa was introduced to stakeholders. What is it that it intends to achieve where others have failed? Very warm welcome to the program.
Thank you, thank you.
Your project, Benefit Cooperation for Africa, is basically conceived in the U.S.
Correct. It was conceived in 2010 in the state of Maryland. It was a culmination of a long-time effort from the progressive community in the state of Maryland. It was the framing is the 2008 economical crisis, the global crisis that started from the U.S. That kind of woke a whole lot of people, and so people wanted a different approach to doing business, and many social entrepreneurs who aspire to create wealth while they address the common good wanted a medium where they can do both. Prior to that, C Corp or for-profit and non-profit was the case. And so it's a culmination of a lot of slow developing objective and subjective reality that came together in 2010 in my state senator. We lobbied him to write a legislation that creates the middle ground, a hybrid of for-profit and non-profit. Basically, it creates wealth. It's accountable. It's like any other business, but the driving force is not greed, not only profit, but other public goods.
It's very, very difficult for projects like you to get off the ground, right? Quite challenging, although progressive, quite challenging, right?
Mm-hmm. Very, very challenging.
So what makes your intervention quite unique in a sense that makes it, make a clean break with the experience that permitted before it?
To borrow a matrix from the left political spectrum, as a kid, I heard this repeatedly. For a new thing to come out, or for a revolution to explode, two things have to come aligned in the same frequency. The objective and the subjective reality have to come together. So, 2010, the two came together. Subjectively, people had that fairness with them. They're forced to abandon that because the system doesn't allow to make it so. And so the 2008 crisis created that objective condition. So it gave birth to an opportunity where this legislation was passed in the state of Maryland. So the timing, I guess, was...
Let's go to the specifics. You've blessed coffee, right?
Correct.
You call it a prototype.
Yes.
Tell me about that. In a way that makes sense in regards to what you just told me.
Blessed coffee came. We called it blessed coffee to symbolize the last cup in the Ethiopian coffee ceremony, which is baraka. Basically, at the center of it's a community-based initiative. So the community-based aspect of the business, the venture, is captured in that the third cup, because as you know, in the Ethiopian coffee ceremony, before the circle breaks out, elders will stand after engagement of an hour, social engagement, where dreams are translated, ideas are exchanged. At the end, the elders will give blessing to the community. So to symbolize that community aspect of the venture, we call it Blessed Coffee. So Blessed Coffee, as such, is a fresh prototype of Benefit Cooperation for Africa. I took the Benefit Cooperation model from the state of Maryland. Today, 38 states have adopted similar legislation, and I wanted to apply it to address the most pressing and urgent challenge we face here in Africa. Where is that? We face one too many. You can have it socially, environmentally, economically. It can only be addressed if we leverage the power of wealth creation, because the non-profit model is not working. The profit model is really driving us to death. It's taking us over the cliff. So the hybrid of the two. Basically, we're putting an African heart in capitalism.
So tell me about the business side to this story of Blessed Coffee.
It was inspired. Actually, let me give credit to where it's due. It was at the early point of entry. And this, I'm a filmmaker turned businessman, right? So when I came to the coffee growing region and see how hard the farmers work, simple people. But the way they have organized themselves, imagine 1,000 farmers in a rural area organized under a cooperative, under the International Cooperative Alliance. 1,000, one co-op, 500 co-ops have a union. They collectively harvest, clean, wash, dry, and sell their coffee in the global market. If 500 people come together and effectively work as one, I was inspired by that. So they've taken it from the source to the market, and I wanted to give them a hand. I wanted to take them from the global market to the consumer, creating a community-based value chain that connects the most important players in any transaction.
So where do you cut in this chain?
Where I cut in, I am between the union and the consumer. I am one bridge. So the chain is farmer, union, Blessed Coffee, consumer. And it does bring both. I'm the bridge that brings both. In fact, I call it profit sharing, investment partnership between the most important significant players in the transaction, the farmer and the consumer. It brings them together. In fact, the authentic name of my initiative is Virtuous Exchange. Commodity market, fair trade market, and going beyond fair trade, I changed the word fair to virtuous, changed the word trade to an exchange. Beyond the commodity is a cultural exchange. So ours is a virtuous exchange that brings the two most important players in a transaction that is very holistic.
This is a profit side to it, right?
Yes.
How about the non-profit side to it? How do you explain it?
There is no non-profit. In fact, the whole model is a hybrid of for-profit and non-profit. It creates wealth, but its ultimate goal is to address those challenges that we face. How does it do? It does it by providing the farmers an investment, profit-sharing investment partnership. So it solves the issue, the challenge, by itself because it's creating wealth and sharing the wealth in the communities that are very important in the transaction. In the case of the farmers, currently they get 10% of the money we pay at the end.
As a consumer?
As a consumer, currently, because they're collectively, working together as a union. If they're not collectively working under the union, they only get 1% of the money. So my model will give them an active presence and will increase their take from 10 to 35 up to 40%, depending on the scenario, different models. So tripling and quadrupling their take. So by the fact that they get an opportunity to invest will automatically dissolve the poverty that's created by the greed-based market.
So this is an idea, broadly sketched, right?
Yes.
When it comes to the real function of this intervention, to the nitty-gritty of it, where do you stand today? I know that you had this conference last week.
Yes.
I know that you have signed a kind of an understanding with the unions, right?
Yes.
How many of them?
Currently, we have in Ethiopia about 8 unions, from large to small. When I started this journey, I started with 3, and the offer we have on the table is for the first strategy, for growth strategy for the DC Virginia market. We're allocating the investment opportunity to $500,000. After 5 years, after we prove the model on the ground and we go in the 4 corners of the U.S., others will be provided an opportunity to join.
So where do you stand today as far as this is concerned?
Okay. This is what we did. Because we wanted to give the investment to the farmers, from the get-go, what we wanted to do was we used the lean startup model of IT technology. When they develop on a product, before they come out to the market, they will work on a prototype, refine it, and when it is ready, they attract funding to scale up. So we raised about $300,000 and, bought coffee, roasted coffee, did the marketing to capture the audience and built the infrastructure, the community-based infrastructure. 2016, we were ready to scale up. That's when we brought the offer to the farmers.
Right. But as we speak, there are several interventions that you are working on, right?
Yeah.
So are you making a real breakthrough in this regard?
You're
just getting off the ground.
We're just, because of the fact that this is a new idea, it involves a lot of stakeholders. At the end of the day, it became a policy issue, a policy between U.S. and Africa. So we had to engage everybody from all perspective and layers. That took the engagement took a lot of time. But most importantly, creating the market, creating the audience, talking to the audience, giving presentation, doing coffee ceremony, telling the story of the farmers, showing the picture of the farmers, like one church at a time, one organization at a time, one festival at a time, and one media at a time. That took, in the absence of $100 million to do massive campaign, we took the grassroots approach, and we have a very solid, well-grounded brand recognition. In fact, our brand is probably $1 million brand currently. So that took time as we were working on the policy side to bring everything together. And today, the last conference we had at the ECA was the breakthrough, the birth of this idea after 15 years of development.
You've been working on it for many years, 15 years at the very least. So is it safe to assume that you have laid the groundwork and effectively sold the idea, everybody has come aboard, and that you're going to see the returns in the years ahead?
Oh, yeah.
Because what I see is this. People are waiting to see whether you're going to succeed or fail.
Yeah.
Is that the correct assessment?
Actually, no, it's not correct. The correct assessment, people are convinced this thing will work. The only remaining component is scaling it up. Those are two different, because in normal transaction, people come up with an idea, when they put it on paper. For the most part, this business plan is hopeful, it's fiction sometimes, and then they attract money and they take a risk. But this is the other way around. We reversed it. We create the market, built the infrastructure, now we're going to scale it up. The idea was already proved.
So, but there have been similar initiatives in the years past, right? There are some that
none that comes close.
But something similar to yours, I'm sure, because they want to make sure that the farmer, and at a higher level, of course, the co-ops, the coffee co-ops in Ethiopia, they wanted to promote them. They wanted them to make the real deal. I mean, they make perfect deal with.
Oh, you're talking about the fair trade model.
Yes, exactly.
The fair trade model is very deceiving. Fair is very relative.
In part, of course, the fair trade.
Fair to who? Correct. So fair came as a result of the crisis of the commodity market, right? So those conscious buyers, quote unquote, wanted to do a little more than what the commodity offers to the farmers. So they came up with this idea called fair trade market certification. So instead of buying from the exporter in Ethiopia, they went to the source. They paid the farmer a little more than the commodity market. Let me give you an example. Currently, on the market, on the commodity market, if the coffee price is $1.25 or $1.50, depending on the market, for 1 pound green coffee, if it is $1 in the commodity market, fair trade will pay $1.50. So that's 50 cents. It's a better than $1, but it does not really fundamentally change the lives of the people who are suffering from the supply side. Ours will break that. It's a very grassroots, from bottom up, revolutionary in the market.
When are you going to see that?
Well, our strategy shows 5 years after the signature of the farmers.
Which is last week?
Last week. So now we're going to go on that side. We have investors who've been waiting for the farmers to sign. So we're going to raise our funds, get into business, and prove the model once again. And then the farmers are going to join us at the back end.
You started with coffee, but you have other commodities coming up, right?
Yes.
And you want to scale it up and introduce it to other African countries. And I understand that you have had this conversation with other African business leaders and so on and so forth, including the African Union Commission and so on, right?
Yes.
So
here is the deal. We have an initiative, Benefit Cooperation for Africa Initiative, and then we have the prototype, Blessed Coffee, and we have an organization we established in 2014 called U.S. Africa Diaspora Business Council for the purpose of inspiring other African diaspora entrepreneurs to look at the model and duplicate it in partnership with other. We want to inspire them. We want to support them. We want to champion the cause. We want to bring policy. We want to bring investment. We want to grow the market so others will duplicate. It's a movement we're trying to initiate. So from cocoa from West Africa, it could be precious stone from Tanzania. It could be culture. Anything that can be resource that can come out of Africa can benefit from this model. In fact, let me tell you, currently I have an IT professional who's joined my movement, created his own IT company called Goom Data out of California. he is now trying to look into the market here, trying to organize IT professionals, young IT professionals, as a co-op. So he will give them training and then bring outsourcing jobs to them. So they can use the same model from coffee to IT. So in the global market, that IT company is going to provide adequate business source in the outsourcing, the global outsourcing, which is on the rise. There's a shortage of labor. Labor is getting expensive in India. So the world is looking for a new market. So even that model can be used for outsourcing in the information technology.
So your conversation with other African institutions, I guess you've started this thing with other economic communities in the continent, right?
Yes. See, what we did at the end of the day, in fact, a Kenyan diplomat once said to me, so what you're telling me is you really created a backdoor entry to the U.S. market for Africans. That's exactly what we did. So currently in the continent, the currency is intra-Africa trade. They just signed, heads of states in 2018 signed the African Continental Free Trade Agreement. I was invited to present this idea at that conference because the role of the African diaspora in being a catalyst agent to grow even intra-Africa trade is very crucial. So how do you bring the U.S. African diaspora to play a key role? Currently, it's disconnected. It's going to go further apart because once you settle in that market, unless there is a market force that pulls you out. So this initiative will be a diaspora-driven initiative that will bring the diaspora here on the continent. So that's how African Union is looking at it. I was invited in 2019 to present the idea at a conference in Addis. So this even brings the missing African diaspora into an active role in the intra-trade Africa as well as the U.S.-Africa trade.
What are the challenges that you expect to face?
The challenge, whenever you have a good idea, whenever you have a new idea, it takes time the status quo won't accept you right away. In fact, I hate to say this, but as I said earlier in our conversation, the crisis that we face today, even the economic crisis as a result of COVID, it is underscoring the importance of my initiative. In the past, when everything is normal, nobody is willing to change. But the fact that we're in crisis right now, as I said earlier, Milton Friedman, the famous free market economist, said a crisis, whether it is real or perceived, is an opportunity to push and usually neglected good ideas to come because the status quo will be open to new alternative ideas. So that has really put a light to this initiative.
Well, you're not saying that this is going to be a smooth ride.
Well, nothing is.
But it's never been so.
It can't be because one challenge that we face globally as well as here on the continent. For instance, the African Union is trying to advance intra-Africa trade. The biggest challenge is the existing infrastructure. There's a disconnect from the roads to the currency to policy. There's a disconnect. You have to iron that difference out. Otherwise, there won't be any intra-Africa trade. So the same here, when you take it globally, the U.S.-Africa trade has always been based on the resource extraction economy the Europeans built that took resources to their processing plant so that they can be processed and be sold back to us. In 2019, I was invited to a conference in Djibouti, and when I woke up in my 5-star hotel, the coffee offer I had on my table was a coffee that came from Switzerland, Nestle. So 45 minutes away from the birthplace of coffee, my choice is a coffee that has been taken from Africa, processed, value-added, and came...
But in a nutshell, are you not talking about the same thing? I mean, we're talking about in this conversation, in this transaction, you have resources from the African continent and financed to a larger degree from the United States of America.
Well,
it's the same.
I'm trying to argue. What I'm trying to say is, we, the people, have the purchasing power, investment power, collectively. When 500,000 small coffee farmers can put $6 per farmer and put $3 million, that's the kind of financing I'm looking for. The African diaspora currently numbered to 5 million in the U.S. Each member of the African diaspora has $20,000 capital from its remittance, purchasing and investment. collectively or in a bundle, if they get an opportunity to invest, when I bring this to the market, that's $20,000 a year times $5 million, that's $100 billion. You know, the U.S. just allocated $60 billion to redefine U.S.-Africa trade, which is a small change relatively to the capacity we Africans have to invest in our own value chain. So we have the resources, we have the power, the purchasing power, the investment power to really infuse capital into this grassroots-oriented, community-based international trade.
Good luck with that, and thank you very much, Tebabu, for joining me to talk about this important initiative. It's really a pleasure having you on.
Thank you for the opportunity. Thank you.